Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my May reading wrap-up. So I have my notebook right here, and I read 7 books in May. It was a slower reading month for me, but I'm fine with that. I'm going to start with the lowest rated books and go to the highest rated books because I actually did not have a single DNF in May, which was great. And overall, it was a great reading month for me. The lowest rating I have was 3.5 stars, which I gave to the first book I'm going to talk about, and that is Death on a Summer's Day by Benedict Brown. This is the 3rd book in the Lord Edgington series, and I did talk about this book in my most recent reading vlog, so I will link that up in the cards in case you want to check it out. For now though, I'll just give a really succinct little explanation about my rating because 3.5 is pretty low for me for a Benedict Brown books. I almost always give his books 4.5 stars, but this one just was not as engaging as the previous ones. I thought the plot was pretty convoluted. It was still a fun read, cute little cozy mystery, and as always, I loved the audiobook narration and Christopher, who is one of the main characters. He's doing the investigating with his grandpa, Lord Edgington. Christopher is just so fun and sweet, and I love all his literary references that he makes. That's about it for the first book. The second book I want to talk about is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I gave this book 4 stars and it was my classic read for the month. Has anyone else read this? Because I have so many thoughts and I finished this book a couple weeks ago, but I'm still not really sure how to explain how I felt about it. This book was just not what I expected it to be. Just going by the cover and the name, I thought it would be about a group of misfit kids. And it kind of was. It's actually more about groups of kids. I guess you could call them gangs who are separated by socioeconomic status. So you have the socials who are kind of like the preppy upper class kids, and then you have the greasers who are lower middle class or working class kids. And these two groups do not get along. In fact, they have some very violent interactions that result in people being really hurt. And I didn't think this book was going to be that dark. It was a little bit disturbing at times and pretty sad because you're following the main character whose name is Ponyboy, and he's, I think, 14 or 15 when the book starts. Either way, he's very young and he's just kind of getting acquainted with what it means to actually be a greaser and be a part of this gang since he is hanging out with the older boys now, including his older brothers, Dairy and Soda Pop. The first page of the book actually opens with Ponyboy basically getting jumped and having a knife pulled on him, so very startling, and then it just kind of continues from there as the tensions between the gangs rise. You get to know a ton of different characters in here, and I was amazed by how attached I got to these characters, especially to Ponyboy and his 2 brothers. I really loved their interactions because the oldest brother, Dairy, he is 20 or 21, still really young. Then you have Soda, who's 16, 17, and Ponyboy, who is the youngest. And Dairy is taking care of all of them because their parents have both passed away, so it's just the 3 boys. And seeing the way they cared for each other, even in this really kind of grim situation where they're dealing with all this social turmoil, was so sweet and wholesome and touching. I really liked that, and that's probably why I was able to finish this book, because if it hadn't had that element, I think I would have been too saddened by it and I would have put it down. But I'm glad I kept reading because this is such a great story and the character development is phenomenal. Ponyboy, he grows up so much. I mean, this is obviously a coming of age story and it takes place over the course of 1 or 2 weeks. It's a very short book, as you can see. And I know it sounds cheesy or overused, but Ponyboy literally goes from being a boy to a man in this book. And just seeing him figure out the world and start to understand people around him was so amazing, especially combined with the fact that this book has some really beautiful writing. I've heard this book praised before, but no one has ever mentioned the writing style, and I have a lot of tabs in here. Well, not a lot, but I have several tabs in here, and most of these are just quotes that I liked. The style of writing really stuck out to me. It was almost poetic in a way, and I really enjoyed that. As I mentioned, I read this book a couple weeks ago and I'm still thinking about it. I don't know, part of me thinks it deserves a higher rating, but because it was pretty sad, I gave it a lower rating, but overall, I really enjoyed this book, and if you've read it, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Oh, and especially if you've seen the movie based off this book, I want to know if I should watch the movie because in my opinion, typically the movie adaptations are worse than the book adaptations, but if this movie adaptation is good, I might check it out because I really enjoyed the story and I'd love to see the characters come to life. The next book I gave 4 stars to was The Bungalow Mystery by Carolyn Keene. This is the 3rd book in the Nancy Drew stories. If you've been watching my channel, then you know I'm slowly working my way through this series, having never read it before as a kid, so I'm experiencing it for the first time now. These books are just so cozy and fun. They're kind of silly just because things fall into place really easily in this book, and I've been noticing that a lot of the time, Nancy gets handed information in a way that's almost laughable. So for example, in this book, she goes to a person's house to talk to him and he's not home, but the neighbor happens to see her and Nancy goes over to the neighbor and basically says, "Hey, can you tell me about your neighbor?" And the neighbor proceeds to basically spill all this guy's business, tell all his information, and it was just a little bit like, okay, that's not normal. Your neighbor shouldn't be giving out all your personal info. But these are just fun to read, you know, I don't expect them to be totally realistic. And I had a good time with this one. This one was a little bit more, I don't want to say dark, because dark isn't the right word, but it was more eventful and the things that happened were a bit more serious, so that piqued my interest. I also listened to this on audiobook for part of the time, and I really enjoyed the narration, especially because they add in some music and sound effects to the story. So yeah, another solid installment of the Nancy Drew mystery stories. Book number 4 is The Mystery of the Jeweled Moth by Katherine Woodfine. This is the 2nd book in the Sinclair's mystery series. I read the first book in February, I think it was, and really enjoyed it, so I was really excited to jump back into the series, and this was a great sequel to the first book. I personally tend to find that sequels don't exactly live up to the original, but this one was almost just as good as the original. I gave it 4.25 stars. I gave the original book 4.5 stars. The only reason this one has a slightly lower rating is because the background to the mystery was a little confusing to me. I feel like if I read it again, I would pick things up more easily, but going through it the first time, I kept being like, wait, who is this person, and when did this happen, and how did he get here, and all that stuff. But eventually, as the story went on, I picked it up and I got things together, so I was able to enjoy the book. And in case you don't know, this book is about 4 teenagers slash kids who work in a fancy department store in London in the early 1900s, and they kind of work together to solve mysteries. It's a really fun, cozy read, and in this one, I really liked how our 4 main characters spent almost the entire book together, because in the first book, you meet all the characters and then they kind of have separate jobs to do to solve the mystery, which is fine. I like seeing them as individual people and seeing how they use their skills and stuff. But in this book, it was just nice to see them all together because I think they have a really great group dynamic. Also, the plot of this story was a lot more heart-pounding in my opinion. There were a couple of, definitely darker is the word for this book, a couple of darker scenes, but nothing too bad. I think any middle grade kid could handle it. Those scenes just made it a little bit more exciting. It kind of reminded me more of an action movie, which sounds weird for a middle grade historical fiction novel, but the first book was more like a cozy mystery type of book. And this is more of a true mystery with a little bit of suspense. It was really nice, and I already have the last 2 books in this series, so I'm excited to continue that when I get the chance. Book number 5 is Under the Starry Skies by Tracie Peterson. I gave this 4.5 stars, and I was blown away by this book. It was my first time ever reading anything by Tracie Peterson, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this book specifically. I've heard her name mentioned as a Christian author, but yeah, I cannot remember ever hearing about this book. Which I don't know why, because after reading this, I thought it was so good. There were so many different things I enjoyed. First of all, it's one of those books with kind of multiple plot points happening. It starts off with our main character, Cassie, who works as a seamstress, and one day while she's leaving a shop that she was in, she accidentally gets knocked down by a group of railroad workers and breaks her wrist, which obviously means she can't sew anymore. And the boss of the boys that knocked her down on accident, his name is Brandon, and basically he feels responsible for her accident since it was his workers that caused it. So he determines that while she's healing up, I think it took like 6 weeks for her wrist to heal, he's going to watch over her and make sure she has what she needs. And of course, they're both single and they're spending all this time together. We know what's going to happen. So this is a romance book. It's a very slow burn romance though, which I loved. I thought it was super realistic and I enjoyed seeing the characters get to know each other and actually felt like I could root for the relationship. Because when books are more insta-love, I have a hard time feeling attached to the characters or supporting the relationship because I'm like, you don't even know each other, you know? It's usually based on physical attraction, which I just can't get behind that. So the romance was great, but that was not the only thing I liked in the story because you also have some elements of mystery going on. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there's like 3 different mysteries going on. So this book is historical fiction. I forgot to mention that. It's set in 1916, I want to say. Yeah, 1916 in New Mexico. And first of all, I just love the 1910s. That's one of my favorite time periods ever. And it's really hard to find books set in that era, so this book got points just for that. But of course, during this time period, the railroad was really important, and Brandon works for the New Mexico Railroad, and he's dealing with this issue where someone is tearing up the tracks all over the place and just messing up the railroad, and they don't know why exactly, and they have no idea who's doing this. So that's the first mystery. And then you have this other mystery where it turns out that Cassie actually has a sister. Everyone thought that she was kind of on her own because her parents have passed away and she lives by herself. But it turns out she has a sister that she has been estranged from for, I want to say 14 years or something, a really long time, and nobody knows why, so that is the second mystery. And then, as I mentioned, Cassie has no parents living, but her dad passed away only recently at the beginning of the book. He was killed in a railway accident. Again, the railroad is a huge part of this book. And everyone thought it was a very standard, or not standard accident, but they thought it was an explainable accident. But as they dig deeper, they realize there might have been some foul play going on, so you have that mystery happening as well. So all that tying together, it just makes for a super interesting story. I was never bored. This book never felt slow at all. It's a very quick read. You can probably finish this in maybe 2 days. And I just enjoyed it so much. There's also some really great faith content in here, which I love to see, and character development as well, especially with Brandon. He was a fantastic character. I really enjoyed reading about him and his history and how he was working through things. That's actually a 4th mystery, now that I'm thinking about it. Brandon starts off, he's a nice guy, but he starts off with being very kind of secretive, and he kind of keeps to himself, and everyone in town has a theory about why he's like this, and you hear all kinds of rumors, but you unravel the truth as the story goes. So yeah, lots of mystery in this book, which is weird because it's just labeled historical fiction. I think it should be labeled, I mean, it is historical fiction, but I think it should be labeled mystery as well. Oh, and one last thing, while Cassie's wrist is healing, since she can't sew, she actually starts writing a book, which I thought was really fun. I love to see bookish elements in books. Again, I gave this 4.5 stars, highly recommend it. It is part of a series. I think it's actually number 3 in a series. Yeah, it's number 3 in a series, but I'm guessing these are standalone books that are kind of interconnected, because I at no point felt lost or confused in this book, even though I haven't read the first 2. So if you haven't read the first 2 either, don't let that stop you from picking this up. The next book I want to talk about is A Body at a Boarding School. That's the second Lord Edgington mystery by Benedict Brown, and I did listen to this on audiobook, so I'll put the cover up on the screen. Now, this one was much more in line with my typical feelings of Benedict Brown books. I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it was so good, and it was so funny. Again, this is the second book in the series, so it's a sequel, and as I mentioned earlier, I typically find sequels to be a little worse than the original, but not this one. In fact, I think I like the sequel more than the first book. I should mention, this series is highly character-driven. There is a plot in the series, but it's mostly about the characters, and as a result of that, the murders in these cozy mysteries don't typically happen until well over an hour into the audiobook, so probably 100 pages or so, maybe not 100 pages, probably 50 pages or so into the actual physical book, which is pretty rare. Mostly in cozies, you get the murder at the end of the first chapter, sometimes even on the first page. But I personally enjoy the slow build to the murder because you do get to focus on your characters more, and as mentioned previously, I love Christopher/Chrissy, that's his nickname. He's just a great character, and I enjoy seeing all the different relationships he has with people in the books and seeing them kind of grow and change. And Christopher's growing up too. He's 16 in the first book, and of course as time goes on he's getting older, and it's just fun to see him kind of exploring the world, I guess. So yes, 4.5 stars for the second Lord Edgington book, and that brings us to the 7th book I read in May, which was Between the Sound and Sea by Amanda Cox. I also included this in a recent reading vlog, so again, that'll be linked up in the cards if you want to hear my full thoughts about this. But basically, I loved this book. It was my first Amanda Cox book, and I totally get why she is such a popular author. Her writing is fantastic. Not only is it just very clearly written, and it's kind of funny too, but it really draws you in and you feel like you're there, which is so important in a book like this, which has a very unique setting. This is a romance/mystery story set in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You have some sort of dual timeline stuff going on because they're investigating a mystery that started in the 1940s and has continued to present day. It's more like flashbacks than dual timeline, but you know, we're not going to be picky here. And you follow our main character, Joey Harris. Her name is Josephina, but she goes by Joey, and she moves out to the Outer Banks to help manage this project, which is undertaken by Walt and his grandson, Finn. And long story short, they are restoring a lighthouse out there on this deserted island. And the lighthouse and the island are full of secrets and stories and unknowns. There's this whole big mystery, missing persons kind of case around it. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because if you want all the details, it's in my reading vlog. But this mystery was fantastic. I typically read cozy mysteries. I don't read a lot of real mysteries. And cozies are very, I don't want to say simple, but usually in cozies, the book is not about the plot. It's again, character-driven stuff. This is not character-driven so much as it is plot-driven. The mystery's at the forefront the whole time, and the way it unraveled was so good. There was so much great build-up to the mystery as well to really keep you interested. And it's also a mystery where the clues actually pan out, because sometimes you get like Scooby-Doo type mysteries where they follow up on a lead and it's a dead end. So they're back at the beginning, they follow up another lead, it's a dead end, and so on like that. But this one was more like a board game type thing where you move forward slowly, piece by piece. And I enjoyed that because I like to try and see if I can solve mysteries as they go along. So that was really fun. There's also a little bit of romance in here, which was nice. Again, slow build, which is more my thing. There was some nice faith content as well. Overall, just a really great, well-rounded book, and I think it's definitely worth the 4.5 stars. All right, so that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I would love it if you commented down below and told me your favorite book that you read in May. I am always looking for new book recommendations and stuff to add to my TBR. Thank you again for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Bye!